Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the webinar organized by Ecosystem Service Partnership and Young Ecosystem Service Specialists. Our webinar aims at strengthening early career researchers and young activists' engagement with the upcoming IPBES 12 Plenary in Manchester. And our webinars today will be divided into two parts. In the first part, you will listen to Davis, IPBES Project Management Officers, and Amarys, IPBES Stakeholder Engagement Officer, talking about the structure and the platform mechanism. This part will be moderated by Dr. Lewis. He's a co-chair of IPBES Spatial Planning Assessment. And in the end, you will have time to ask more questions and interact with our guests. In the second part, we focus on navigating the plenaries and the negotiation process. And you will hear from Eliška. She's a Czech Republic national focal point for IPBES. Dr. Carla-Leanne from Center of Interdisciplinary Methodology, University of Warwick, and joined by two of YESS delegation to IPBES, Naomi and Nita. And here is the YESS facilitators, Akshant and Rahul and myself. So now we'll leave the floor to Dr. Lewis to start the webinars.
I was just saying that I want to be brief so we can go mostly to the topic. This is a very short introduction to the Ecosystem Services Partnership. For those of you who are not familiar with us, so of course, a warm invitation to join us. This is a network of roughly 3,000 scientists, academics, practitioners, policymakers across the world. We work in the 5 continents. We basically, I don't know if I can basically move this thing. It's not, it seems like it's not working. Okay, yeah, we're a worldwide network. It was initiated in 2008 and formally established in 2010. And basically, we organize big conferences every year. I'm going to be announcing the conference for this year as well. We have a structure that is divided in national networks. So let's say if you're in a country, probably there is a national network working, so you can reach out those guys. We have also a structure divided in working groups that can be thematic, sectorial, or by biomes. So basically, this gives a very broad space for everyone to engage in the work that we are doing, which is basically, as I said, to exchange knowledge to promote the application of ecosystem services science into policy making. We organize conferences, as I said before. It's a very vibrant community. Probably one of the best assets that we have is a really engaging group of people deeply concerned and deeply compromised with biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this is just some pictures of past conferences. And last announcement, the next conference we're organizing is going to be in Prague from 18 to 22 of May. We have already more than 600 abstracts received, organized in roughly 65 sessions. So it's going to be a really interesting space to discuss about ecosystem services, biodiversity, and nature's conservation. Language is going to be in English, and there is actually only possibility to join in a physical way. There is not going to be possibility to join online. Early bird registration is open already until 8th of March. And I think that that's all from my side, Rahul. So I'll give you the flow back so you can introduce our guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis. So we will go with David. David is there for the next few minutes. Yeah.
Perfect. Can you confirm that you see my slides? Perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm David González. I'm program manager for the IPBES knowledge component. So basically, I oversee the production of IPBES assessments.
And what I will do now is give you a quick introduction to what is IPBES and its current working program, just to set the stage for my colleague Amarys here to open up a bit more the conversation on opportunities for stakeholder engagement within IPBES. So IPBES, in short, stands for Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and it is exactly that, a space where science and policy meet. Basically, IPBES, what it does is it synthesizes the current available evidence on different topics concerning biodiversity, ecosystem services, nature's contributions to people, and it makes it available in a simplified format for decision makers to own this information. Later on, in other spaces beyond IPBES, the parties use the information that is produced by IPBES to support decision making, for example, at global scale by developing things like, or tools like the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which takes on findings of the first global assessment or the assessment on diverse values of nature, or other spaces like CMS, for example, that took on many of the findings of the sustainable use assessment as examples. The mission of IPBES is to strengthen knowledge foundations for better policy through science for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being and sustainable development. And as you see, it is quite a broad objective or mission compared to other multilateral environmental spaces. And it was established in 2012 as an independent intergovernmental body by 94 states. So despite the fact that we're hosted by UN organizations, we remain an independent body, which means that our funding is independent, and what we do basically is defined by our own plenary and not the UN plenary itself. We have our member states, which currently are more than 150 states, and we continue to grow. The structure of IPBES has a plenary, which is the main body that makes the decisions for us. The plenary basically oversees the production of all the all the deliverables, but they also mandate what is it that we are doing and what is the budget that is allocated to the different objectives of our work program. But also they meet every year, and they are joined also by stakeholders and observers who also participate in the plenary discussions, either through the stakeholder day or just by following the conversations and engaging with delegates that participate officially at the plenary. We also have a bureau, a multidisciplinary expert panel, expert groups and task forces, and the secretariat who facilitates the work of all of these different groups within the structure of IPBES. And more specifically, as I mentioned, the plenary is the governing body of IPBES. It comprises the IPBES members and plenary observers, and they usually meet once per year, sometimes a bit over a year, like in the case right now, for example. And they decide on what is the work program of IPBES, what is it that we have to do. And so basically what we're doing, these assessments, they're all mandated by the member states that are part of the IPBES plenary. So that is a difference. No, this is not an isolated academic exercise. It comes from the needs that have been identified by the members of the IPBES plenary. They request for assessments, but they also request for other things, for example, capacity building activities, policy support tools activities, communication, etc. And they also decide on the bureau and the multidisciplinary expert panel who oversee the technical and also the procedural and scientific quality of the development of the products that IPBES undertakes. They also make decisions on budget allocation, and they approve the scoping reports and the assessments that come out of the platform. The observers to the plenary, they are states who are not yet members of IPBES, but also other biodiversity-related conventions, such as CBD, for example, relevant UN bodies, for example, such as the Food and Agriculture Organization, and other accredited organizations. they are not only contributors to the IPBES platform, but they also are very often end users of the outcomes that are produced by IPBES. So as I mentioned, for example, they often also provide input to the decisions that are being made within their own spaces. The Bureau oversees all administrative functions. It comprises the chair of IPBES and also 4 vice chairs and 5 additional officers. The multidisciplinary expert panel oversees all scientific and technical functions, so they ensure that the quality of the products that are being produced by the experts are the best quality. And it is comprised by 5 experts of each of the UN regions. We also have the expert groups and task forces. And for example, Luis Inostroza here is part of an expert group producing the spatial planning and ecological connectivity assessment. I see others here that are fellows, for example, in ongoing assessments, who are selected scientists and knowledge holders who basically undertake on voluntary basis the mandate that the plenary gives to them, and they carry out assessments and other deliverables. And we have the Secretariat, including technical support units who support the implementation of the IPBES work program. They support the plenary, the Bureau, the MEP, administrative functions, and they are led by the Executive Secretary, which currently is Lutando Siva. Now, what is it that the plenary has mandated for us and that we're currently working on? So the current work program that it's up to 2030 has 6 different objectives, which include assessing knowledge. So this is basically the assessments that we produce, where we synthesize and critically evaluate the currently available evidence on different topics. But also we have objectives on building capacities. And here we have the fellowship program, where, for example, Esan, who is here, is part of the fellowship program. They engage as experts within the assessments, but they also have opportunities of capacity building in the science policy space. We have an objective on strengthening the knowledge foundations, which is related to ensuring that we have proper data management processes, that we generate the catalysis of knowledge based on the gaps that are identified by the assessments, and that we integrate diverse knowledge systems such as indigenous and local knowledge, which is explicitly mandated by the IPBES plenary. We also have an objective on supporting policies. This is on providing the uptake of completed assessments to support policy support tools and methodologies, as well as catalyzing the development of scenarios and models on biodiversity and ecosystem services. We have an objective on communicating and engaging, which includes, for example, the efforts that we do on stakeholder engagement, as well as improving the effectiveness of the platform program in the spatial planning that will be considered at the next IPBES plenary, and a second assessment on a thematic assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services, which will be considered in 2 plenaries from now. Each of the objectives that we have that I introduced already has a set of experts which are accompanied by a technical support unit, and they either conform an expert group or a task force that through the year they work on delivering the products that are mandated by the IPBES plenary. As I mentioned, this is just a timeline to highlight, and actually it's not updated anymore, sorry for that, to highlight that within this year, we plan to consider the business and biodiversity assessment in IPBES 12, IPBES 13, the 2 methodological assessments, and then in IPBES 14, the second global assessment. IPBES has so far delivered 13 assessment reports, which include 8 reports that were finalized as part of the first work program. It has involved more than 3,000 experts as part of this process. And it has included 11 thematic assessments and 2 methodological assessments, which are the assessments on diverse values of nature and the scenarios and models. There are 3 more methodological assessments coming up: the business and biodiversity, the spatial planning and ecological connectivity, and the monitoring assessment. And they all have different objectives, but also different formats. So the business, the monitoring and the spatial planning assessments are being developed under a fast track process, which means less reviews, a scoping document that was shorter in terms of production, and also more demand on the expert group itself. And the second global assessment, which is produced under a normal timeline. They have different objectives. In the case of business and biodiversity, to look at the knowledge base on business and biodiversity and the methods for measuring dependencies and impacts and the options for actions derived from that. The monitoring assessment, which is focused on assessing the capacity that we have to monitor biodiversity and nature's contributions to people, and the progress to achieve global goals. What are the existing data systems, the capacities and resources that are needed to improve these systems, and the opportunities and options for actions derived from that. The spatial planning assessment, which looks at the options for improving planning for effective conservation, restoration, and sustainable use, and the methods, guidance, tools, scenarios, models that exist, and that should be also worked on to support better spatial planning. And the second global assessment, which looks at the knowledge that exists and that has become available since the first global assessment to support the implementation of global objectives, the assessment of progress in the achievement of global targets, and the scientific and technical basis for additional efforts to achieve a 2050 vision for biodiversity. So I'll stop there, and I think I'm giving the floor to my colleague Amarys.
Hello, everyone. Apologies, I'm trying to share the screen at the same time. So my name is Amarys Preuss. I'm also working with the Secretariat and specifically on stakeholder engagement. I believe you should see the screen now.
We see your screen, yeah, in full mode.
Yeah.
Perfect. So yes, I just wanted to follow up what David was saying with some specific information on engagement. So here's just example of what it looks like when media takes up assessments. This was an example of the global assessment published in 2019. The purpose of these assessments, as David said, is to provide scientifically sound evidence, but also to just simply, in a broader sense, bring biodiversity into the conversation, at the front of policy discussions, and providing tools and concepts to formulate pathways for change. And this can be for everyone. So just to show you how it can be taken up by many people. And for this, I collected a few examples. And a disclaimer, I'm not presenting here the quality of these uptakes, but simply their diversity. So for instance, many policymakers at the global level take up IPBES assessments, from international cooperation to other transnational systems, and of course at a national level also. It's also citizens themselves who take up findings from IPBES assessments to ask their governments for better biodiversity-related policies. In this example, Ireland convened a Children's Assembly who worked on the findings of the global assessment to formulate propositions towards the government for the definition of a national biodiversity plan. It's also the private sector taking up assessments, and we will see more of it going further with the publication of the business and biodiversity assessments, which will be considered at the IPBES 12 plenary meeting. But biodiversity issues are more and more recognized as a challenge for business, and therefore business actors and decision makers are taking up assessment findings. It's also local governments at the city level, at the county, or at a regional level, taking up findings to search for new concepts and new pathways to act locally and entrenched in a territory. And finally, it's also the art world using findings from the IPBES assessment to call attention to biodiversity loss and the importance of ecosystem services. So who are the people who do this? It's what we put under the umbrella of stakeholders. So stakeholders are both contributors to IPBES outputs and end users of IPBES outputs. So it's all the ones who make use or who contribute some expertise to the assessment. And the diversity and the very existence of these stakeholders, their diversity and their engagement, are a marker of the relevance and the quality also of the work of the platform. So it's really important to have this engagement at all levels. And there are many ways that this can happen. I highlighted a few examples. David touched upon a few ways to contribute directly. And this is very evidently the first way to engage with IPBES. And many of you are from the scientific or academic world. And so this might be an easy way for you to contribute, is to participate as authors or fellows, as reviewers during the external reviews of the assessments, providing data, knowledge, providing results of studies you might have conducted, participating in the dialogues. But there are many, many other ways to also work with IPBES and contribute to IPBES. Notably working to build capacity for others to take up assessments. And the work, for instance, of YESS here is exactly that also. By organizing these webinars, by mobilizing a community, YESS contributes to building the capacity of a broader group of stakeholders. It's also supporting policymakers. A lot of work is done by different organizations, for instance, in translating findings of assessments into concrete propositions for policymakers. A number of non-governmental organizations might be doing that, you might see policy briefs or white papers or these sort of activities that take up the findings and translate them in a way that policymakers at a national or a local level might find relevant for their territory or their jurisdiction. It's also knowledge generation and catalysis, and in particular, IPBES assessments identify knowledge gaps. So every assessment will flag where there might be missing some knowledge or might be missing more data to consolidate the findings. And from this, many researchers take these gaps and these identified gaps and build up new research, develop new research to answer these gaps. And we're actually seeing more funders, for instance, at the EU level, that ask to support a research project, that ask the researchers to demonstrate that they are responding to a knowledge gap. So this is also a way in which the feedback loop with IPBES can be consolidated. Beyond direct contributions to the functions of IPBES, there's also a whole world of activities that build a community, that develop it, increase it, support outreach. It can be uptake events, webinars, conferences, and by uptake events, we mean any event where a product of IPBES, for instance, an assessment, is taken up and shared with others for their benefit. It's network mobilization via, in particular, the two self-organized stakeholder networks, ONET and IPBES. I'll come back on these. Or via also the communities of practice, and I'm including YESS in this. It's work on storytelling, showing what can be done. All these stories that I have, all these examples I gave you previously, they come from a database that we consolidate, where we try to find instances where IPBES assessments have been used, because these are really useful to inspire others to share more. And speaking of this, I just want to mention that this is an open database also, so you are welcome to contribute to it if you've conducted any activity using, for instance, a global assessment or a regional, or any IPBES product. We're really interested to know, because it might actually inspire others, and we're happy to amplify the outreach on this. I'm not going to list all of them, but it can also be working with national platforms, and in some countries, and a growing number of them have established national platforms by which they call out for expertise from their country to help the national focal point, so the person who represents the government at IPBES, devise a country position. This person will also, for instance, make calls during open reviews so that national expertise is being brought together. Sometimes they might work together to, for instance, during a review, to consolidate all the different expertise from the country, bring it in as one package, to simplify a little bit the process. So if your country has a national platform, this is a great way also to interact in a relevant way for the area you are in. There are many other ways, participating in the plenary sessions, and this is, of course, what is coming up in just a couple of weeks. Stakeholder networks have a seat in the plenary and are invited to speak on behalf of all stakeholders, to contribute to the debate, to contribute to the negotiation around the assessments. We also have, and this is really useful to expanding the outreach, some offers, for instance, on translating some of the outputs into new languages so that we can reach a new audience. Not necessarily the full report, because that is, of course, an immense work, but summaries for policymakers or fact sheets, those are great ways in which then there is a product that can be used to help localize the impact of the assessments. So I mentioned the stakeholder networks. There are two self-organized stakeholder networks that are recognized as the spokesperson networks for all stakeholders at the plenary. The first is the open-ended network of stakeholders. You have the QR code here or on the website if you want to look at what they do. For instance, there is a direct connection with YESS here, and reciprocal contribution. So the open-ended network is an umbrella network bringing in all interested stakeholders in dialogue with IPBES. The second one is specific for people from indigenous communities. So it's the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Same thing, if you are from one of those communities and you are interested, you are very welcome to join these networks. And lastly, but not least, these stakeholder networks lead the preparation also of Stakeholder Day, which is the day on the day prior to plenary, is awarded to stakeholders to build up a day of community of experience sharing, of information gathering, where it's less formal than a plenary. The agenda is decided by the stakeholders themselves. So this year's edition will be in Manchester on 2nd of February. And you can also follow online if you can't travel to Manchester. So this is a brief overview. There are many other ways of participating. If you're interested in doing anything, here's an email where you can contact me and we can talk further about how to work with IPBES in your own context. And with that, I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
so
much,
Amarys.
Amarys, and thank you very much, David. So we have time for questions. First, would like to open the floor for anyone who would like to just jump and make a question to our speakers. Meantime, I'm looking at the chat. So someone would like to? Okay, I have here a question for David. It's about the balance between scientists and policy experts within the 5 regions, 25 members. It is 50 to 50. I'm not completely sure if it refers to assessments and then follow up is how, by whom IPBES reports are peer reviewed?
Okay. So, first question. I think the 25 members is meant for the multidisciplinary expert panel and the balance between science and policy experts. So, what important thing, the Bureau is more the policy space. That's where governments are usually represented, while the multidisciplinary expert panel is represented mostly by academics with a long-standing track record. And many times these academics they have engaged in the policy space. So they have been directors of biodiversity or ecosystems ministry, depending on where it is. So they usually have both sides of the expertise, but I wouldn't be able to say whether this is 50-50 because as you know, professional careers are more complex than that. But when you see the overall expert group, it's a similar thing, depending also on the assessment. You would have more practitioners, which are not only policy experts, they are also people from the private sector or people who just work in NGOs, consultancies, etc., applying the knowledge that they are synthesizing. And this varies from assessment to assessment. I actually would say that for methodological assessments, the practitioner rate increases because many times the people who are applying the methodologies, they are more in the practitioner side than in the academic side. And this just allows for an increased application number by this expert group. And for a thematic assessment, which is often assessing the state of knowledge on a given topic, we tend to have a bit more academic experts. How and by whom are the reports peer reviewed? This is by everyone, basically, as Amarys outlined. The drafts of the assessment reports, they are made available for the world to review them. So you don't need to have a PhD, you don't need to have an academic career. You can be a practitioner, you can be an indigenous knowledge holder, you can be a youth representing a youth group, etc. And you can basically access and register. You need to register in the IPBES webpage when there's calls for comments for the drafts of the assessments, and you can read the drafts of these documents and provide comments. Later on, it is a task of the expert group to basically go through all of these comments and answer one by one how these have been or not have been addressed in the next drafts of their documents. But basically, all of the comments are considered, and there's a decision that is made on the basis of science, on the basis of the scope that they have been given by the countries, and on the basis of the wetland that they have to develop these documents on how certain comments have been addressed and to which extent. No?
Thank you very much, David. There is another question about, or probably Masha, you would like to go with your question?
No, I just wanted to say that thank you. My questions were accurately understood and answered, and we'll make sure to feed this into CYMG processes since we just obtained accreditation. So thank you so much.
Okay, good. There is another question, which is very long, so I'm just going to go basically to what is the thing that is being asked here, which is about the engagement. So how a person can, on a personal level, get engaged in the IPBES work.
Should you go, Amarys, and maybe I can provide a bit more input on the selection of experts themselves?
Sure. Well, it really depends on what you want to do and what you want to contribute also, or your expertise. But I see that the question is a lot about how to apply. So in that way, to contribute directly to the content of an assessment. So yeah, as we said, there are ways to become author or fellow. When calls are open, I see that you mentioned like next year. This is not an actual yearly system. It's when an assessment is about to be launched. So it's a little bit more irregular than that, just as a fair warning. The external review is a really important moment also for people maybe who are new, who want to approach an assessment. It helps to understand how an assessment is built, also how to contribute. For people who have maybe more specific expertise than you, of course, if you have more restricted expertise, then you can contribute on a specific section or chapter that might relate to your expertise. That's a really useful way to provide content. I briefly mentioned the online dialogues during each review. There is a dialogue with the authors of the assessment, so this is a more direct way of sharing information. And then again, there are as many ways to work with IPBES as there are people. It really depends on situations, on how much time you want to spend on your context here. So this is why it's also interesting to simply get in contact with us and see how we can develop something together, because many people have been very creative in finding new ways to engage in developing IPBES assessments in simple language, fact sheets, or these sort of things that help promote and joining a community such as the community around YESS or the ONET network is also a good way to come into the, let's say, ecosystem and understand how, and also to hear of opportunities, because they will relay all the calls for expertise. So that's a great way to work with IPBES also. So I'll stop here because otherwise I need to start again the whole presentation and go deeper in each, but feel free also to contact me.
And if I may add on the actual selection of experts and fellows, it is important to note that there is a guideline. Like basically, we produce products based on the way that the plenary has allowed us to produce products. So we follow their rules, which means that we have a maximum of 20% of people who can be nominated by organizations, and then the rest of the 80% needs to be nominated as a minimum by governments. So what we've seen in the tendency is that people have increasingly applied through organizations to be part of the assessment process, which actually has lowered their possibility to be selected in the assessment process, because with an increased number of organizations nominating, there's less possibility that you're actually going to be selected. So we always suggest that you reach out to your national focal points to the extent possible. If you're in an IPBES plenary, reach out to them, introduce yourselves, etc., so then they get to know you. But also if you happen to run across them in an event in your own countries, etc., it's always good to introduce yourselves. And also through the IPBES website, you can basically send an email to your national focal points as well, just to introduce yourself and let them know that you're interested in engaging in future deliverables. So then you basically get that entry But it's important also to acknowledge that this is a science policy process, which means that it is not only based on the nominations from organizations, but also when governments nominate an expert, they are basically saying this is a person that we feel that has the knowledge needed for contributing to this specific assessment. No? And then the second I wanted to mention is also that when people apply for fellowship, the age limit is only indicative, which I think is 35 years old. So you can be older, but also the fellowship program is increasingly a very competitive program. So more and more the applications for the fellowship program increase, which means that being selected just becomes more and more difficult. And this is actually also for experts. So we know that a lot of people are do not end up being selected experts for the assessments. But you can always contribute as contributing authors, as reviewers, and then taking up the findings of the assessments themselves, or suggesting databases, and in all the other ways that Amarys has already outlined.
Good. Thank you very much, both of you. Someone else would like to make a question? Probably this could be last round, so we can continue with our 2 blocks. We have 2 blocks more. Well, if you're still deciding, I have a question for either David or Amarys. During the plenaries, basically discuss one specific assessment. In this case, going to be the biodiversity and business and biodiversity. And from a stakeholder's point of view, how can the deliberation of the particular assessment be, let's say, influenced by particular stakeholders participating in the plenary? If you can probably a little bit explain how that works.
Yes, I would say that the biggest point of influence is actually not the plenary, but usually is through the external reviews, because there you don't have a filter. You just comment, and then the experts need to look at those comments. Now, in a plenary, you can always try to reach out to the member states or to the observers to highlight issues that you feel need to be addressed. But it is always up to them to actually raise their flag and make a statement on those aspects. And this is, for example, where the stakeholder networks become useful as well, because they have strong ties to specific governments also, or specific observers or states, where, for example, the indigenous group, they often have close ties with certain governments and use those ties to lobby the big things that concern them, no? Especially in the countries that have strong support for these types of things. So this is basically what I would say, like generating these networks and then linking up with those that have a stake in that specific space of plenary, but also using all the other mechanisms, which include comments, to ensure that there's evidence in those documents that can line up with needs that different actors have. And actually, this is important in the future, especially in the next external reviews that will come up next year, which include an external review on the spatial planning and ecological connectivity assessment, and a review on the second global assessment. So these are 2 big reviews coming up this year that you can keep an eye out for, and you can register in the IPBES website to get the notifications when they come out.
Thank you very much, David. Actually, it was exactly my idea, so that we can already start to invite this very nice group of experts, young experts, to join in the reviews of the 2 assessments that David was mentioning. So from my side, thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Amarys. It was very insightful, super clear. We would like to, on the behalf of ESP, Ecosystem Services Partnership, to thank the both of you for being willing to contribute to our webinar. And then with that, I think I'm going to give back the floor to Rahul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you so much, David and Amarys, for the nice, very informative presentation. So with this, our first part of the webinar is finished. So now I'll give floor to the Ehsan for the second part of our webinar. Floor to Ehsan.
Thank you, Rahul, and thank you so much, David, Amarys, and Luis for providing such an informative session. My name is Ehsan. I'm a YESS executive member, and I'll be helping in fact moderating for the second part of the webinar. So while the first part of the webinar provided the institutional and structural context of the EPBES. So we were shifting gears from how EPBES is structured to more how the plenary actually works in practice. So in this section, our speakers will focus on negotiation dynamics, the role of the observers, and the very practical advice for early career researchers who will be following or attending EPBES 12 in Manchester. So we'll hear from perspective from a national focal point, experienced observers, and colleagues actively involved in EPBES pathways. So I'm going to quickly provide a round of introduction of our speakers for the second part, and then we'll go from there. So our first speaker is Eliška Rolfová, who is the national focal point for EPBES in Czech Republic. So she'll provide an overview of the key agenda items and negotiation dynamics expected at EPBES 12 in Manchester. And then we'll hear from Naomi B. and Nita Shashidharan, both of whom have direct experience working with EPBES as observer and YESS delegates. Naomi is part of research training group called Fixing Future at Goethe University, Frankfurt, and is currently doing her PhD in sociology. Her research focuses on problem frames that shape the governance of biodiversity. On the other hand, we have Nita, who's a PhD student at the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment. Her PhD focuses on land change and ecosystem services in protected area in India. She's the current YESS Honored Liaison and has previously attended EPBES 8 virtually. Last but not least, we have Dr. Carla-Leanne Washbourne, so Carla has also extensive experience engaging with EPBES processes and will speak about concrete pathways for early career researcher to get involved beyond simply attending the plenary. So Carla is an interdisciplinary researcher, practitioner, and educator. Her work endeavors to improve decision-making in urban setting focus on environment and sustainability issues. She's also a reader at the Center for Interdisciplinary Methodologies at the University of Warwick, and she has previously attended EPBES as part of the YESS and ESP delegation. So she also has developed and supported peer training published on early career engagement at the Science Policy Interface. So I would like to invite our first speaker, Eliška, to give her presentation. So over to you, Eliška. I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you very much. So I hope my presentation is now shared. So please, could you kindly confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So good time of the day to you all. So it's my pleasure to be here and to join you for this meeting. So as already mentioned, I'm the secondary national focal point for the Czech Republic for EPBES, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the alternate bureau member for the region of Eastern European states. So we are now very busy with the preparation for the upcoming plenary, and I would like to share with you what is indeed expected. But before doing so, also at this point, I would like to express just how grateful and proud the Czech Republic is now that we have the first IPBES assessment co-chair who is based in the Czech institution, that is Luis. So we are very proud of that. Now, coming to more detail of the presentation and what is indeed expected from the upcoming plenary. You have probably seen the agenda of our meeting. So this is outlined into 2 documents. The agenda is also more developed in the addendum to the document 1. As you can see, we have 14 agenda items. However, many of them, more than half, in fact, they are rather procedural. They will be dealt with at the plenary. So this is rather the points that we have to discuss, but maybe not so much of discussions are expected there. So out of those, I would maybe highlight some that might be more interesting, which is indeed the election of officers, as the IPBES plenary will be selecting the new 25 members of the multidisciplinary expert panel. So, the discussions should, of course, not take place at the plenary there, because most of the discussions will be held in the regions, because each of the regions will nominate 5 experts that could then be elected by the plenary. And of course, another interesting discussion at the plenary might be the dates and the venues of future sessions. So we will see if there is a new country who would offer hosting. But for the rest, and I'm referring to agenda items 6 to 10, we can expect more substantive discussions. So I'll just try to provide a bit more detail of what is expected. Now, how the work is usually organized. I've mentioned the plenary, so this is how we will start, and we will reconvene as the plenary 2 times during the week. But in the meantime, most of the discussions will be held in a contact group and in 2 working groups. So this is the usual scenario that we will also follow for IPBES 12, that usually there is a lunchtime contact group on budget, and then the rest of the work is divided into 2 working groups. So the first one will be focusing mainly on the business and biodiversity assessment, and the second one will address all the other substantive agenda items, so 8, 9, and 10. Now, you might have already seen how it will translate into practice. So this is just a visualization of what is expected. So while the plenary is never overlapping with any other meeting, the working groups usually are taking place in parallel. So I think it's important for information for you that we will need to choose which of the working groups you will follow. So while business and biodiversity assessment might be a first option for you to go to, of course, the other items might be of some interest for you as well. Now, usually we do have also the evening sessions. Of course, it depends how the discussions go. I have to say that for IPBES, we are still quite reasonable, so we usually do finish by 9:30 in the evening, so we don't have any very late night sessions. However, you can see that we will be very busy throughout the week. Also, each morning we have regional consultations, so each of the regions, they meet, they discuss the progress in the negotiations and any further adjustments that need to be made. And of course, the bureau is meeting every day to see how the work continues, and then they go back to their regions. So to provide more detail on the substantive agenda items, so item 7, as I've mentioned, this will be considered by working group 1, and it is indeed a business and biodiversity assessment. So what happens at the plenary is that the summary for policymakers is negotiated line by line. So of course, there is not enough time to go through the chapters of the assessment, so then these are in the end considered for acceptance, whereas the summary for policymakers, indeed each of the words and commas need to be agreed by the plenary. So this is why it takes quite a considerable time to discuss. Now, there is already the summary for policymakers available, but at the same time, there was an opportunity for governments to provide their final comments by the 18th of January, and these are now being considered by the chair. So very shortly before the meeting, the chair of IPBES will be preparing so-called chair's note, and it is usually suggested that it is this document that's then submitted for consideration. And the reason is that based on these final reviews, there might be quite a lot of text in the SPM that is already clean. So there is a suggestion not to go into much of a detail of this clean text that seem to be agreeable to all members, but rather focus on those parts where finalization is needed. And you may also see one of the info documents where the full process of how the assessment has been developed is provided. So these will indeed be very interesting negotiations going line by line. The main point there is, of course, that the substance should not be changed because this has been provided by the experts, but rather it should be some sort of fine-tuning so that the messages that are being expressed by the assessment and the summary for policymakers are, let's say, easily understandable by the more general public and are then sort of acceptable for further policymaking. But we should always refer back to the assessment experts so that indeed the final versions of the key messages are substantiated and are really based on the work that was done by the experts. So for the items that will be considered in working group 2, so item 10, this refers to the discussion on the other objectives of IPBES. So mainly this will focus on the work plans for the implementation of those objectives. So for most of them, there are task forces or TSUs that implement those work plans. So there will be discussion on the program of work or for those work plans for the period until IPBES 13. So while documents in preparation for this item are quite extensive, most of the work plans, they also follow what has been already decided in the past, so they just provide guidance for future work. Item 9, this will be very interesting, maybe not so much for discussion within the working group, because what is suggested is rather a intersessional process, how to deal with the recommendations of the midterm of the report of the midterm review. But the midterm review as such is indeed a very interesting document. There has been a midterm review of the rolling work program of IPBES ongoing, the external part and the internal part, and now the report of this review is available. And it is providing some of the recommendations for improving the effectiveness of the platform. So those recommendations are indeed something very interesting, and it will be interesting how the IPBES, the Bureau, MEP, and the Executive Secretary will pick up on those recommendations for future work. Then another item, item 10, it's I find it particularly interesting. So it's a bit of a leftover item from IPBES 10, because as was mentioned by David, the rolling work program of IPBES is sort of in a way flexible. So it was decided that while there was an agreement on some of the assessments at the initial stage, we might need to come back to the work program and to see what could be the topics of future assessment based on the current situation. So at IPBES 10, there was a decision on other assessments, including the one that are ongoing right now, but there was a last slot for a possible third fast-track assessment, but the topic has not been decided. So what has been decided that to postpone the decision until IPBES 12, which is now being indeed considered, and also the draft decision is based on a compilation of submissions from members and further guidance provided by the MEP and the Bureau. But in fact, what is being suggested is not to make a decision on the next assessment at this plenary, but rather to postpone it to the next one, because maybe more strategic considerations are needed at this stage. We have the midterm review, we also the recommendations, also the task forces will finish by IPBES 13. There are some considerations on the financial situation, and also we might need to assess very carefully the timing of the future assessments. So at the same time, there were some proposals that maybe we can also focus on other types of deliverables, not only assessments, but also maybe synthesis reports, etc. And also that more focus should be paid to the uptake of the assessments that already have been finalized. So the intersessional process that is now proposed is to take all these elements into consideration and to come up with more specific proposals for IPBES 13. So yeah, I think I can conclude here. I try to be quite brief, mindful of time, but of course, if there are any questions, I'm very much happy to take them, including I have the perspective of the focal point attending the plenary. So if you are interested in any of that, of course, I'll be happy to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eliška. We will have the Q&A in the end of our session once all speakers are done. So I So if it's okay with you, and just like bear a few minutes with us, and then I'll invite our two other speakers, Naomi and Nita, for their presentation, and then we will have Carla and then QA. Thank you.
Okay, can you see my presentation? Well, it should be now in presentation mode. Yeah, fine. Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Now that you have an overview by Eliška over the IPBES 12 agenda, Nita and I will present you a little bit more about what you can expect to happen at the plenary and also give you some practical guidance. No, doesn't work. Okay. So I will do a quick recap of what Eliška has just said, like how do IPBES plenary sessions work? How is the work, what are the different work modi during the plenary session? And then I will go into a bit more detail about how the actual negotiations work, what the role of observers is, and then I will hand over to Nita, who will give you some more practical guidance. So, as you've heard from David before, the plenary is the decision-making body of IPBES. It is made up of member states and usually meets once per year. But what actually happens at IPBES plenary sessions? So there are different work modi during the week of the plenary session. So the plenary is the overarching space where all the decisions have to be made formally, and on all the agenda items that Eliška has just presented to you. So some agenda items that are more organizational or maybe procedural will usually be taken directly in plenary. But then other agenda items that are more of a substantive nature, such as the approval of assessments or work program deliverables, will be discussed in two parallel working groups. The working groups are tasked with developing consensual text that is then brought back to plenary towards the end of the week, where the final and formal decisions are made. Now I've prepared some pictures for you, so you get a little bit more of a visual impression what to expect during the IPBES plenary. So during the beginning of the week, you will find yourself in a big room and it will look something like this. But most of the time you will spend in smaller rooms, which looks a bit like this. I mean, it's still big rooms, but a little bit smaller. Then maybe you can expect some intense discussions during the week and maybe also a bit of a headache, but hopefully towards the end of the week, everyone will be happy with the decisions that are going to be taken. So, but you will spend most of your time in the working groups during the week. So let's go a bit into more detail how the negotiations will take place in the working groups. So I've already hinted at the fact that within IPBES, decisions are made by consensus. So consensus in this context does not necessarily mean unanimity, but that no formal objections remains. The negotiations are also text-based, which means that the basis for the negotiations are the working documents that are prepared for the different agenda items and that are available online. And those documents will be projected onto a screen in the room so that everyone can follow the discussion and know where we're at in the document at the moment. So after a short introduction by IPBES experts of the contents to be discussed in the documents, delegates will be invited to express their views on the text and amend the text if necessary until consensus is reached. But how does this consensus building actually look in practice? So let's take the summary for policymakers of an assessment as an example now. Summary for policymakers have to be approved by the plenary, which means that it has to be projected to line-by-line discussion and agreement, of course, in dialogue with the authors, as Eliška already said. But the working group will have to agree basically on every sentence of each key and background message that is part of a summary for policymakers. So that does not mean that the scientific content can be changed, because all messages have to be based on the evidence that is part of the assessment chapters. However, it could be that one delegation is not happy with the inclusion of a particular sentence in the key messages and therefore suggests to delete it, or that a change is proposed to a particular wording. So proposed changes like these will be included in the document in track changes. So you know this option in Word to actually track the changes that are made to the text. But then oftentimes delegates will express diverging views on those proposed changes. So you will have different options of changes to the text, which will be indicated by square brackets. So square brackets in a document will always indicate some sort of disagreement. And obviously, the goal of the negotiations is to end up with clean text. So once an agreement for a text passage under discussion is met, the brackets will be deleted and the track changes will also be accepted so that we end up with a clean text. But what is actually our role as observers in all of this? So as the rules of procedure of IPBES establish, observers can participate in the plenary, but without the ability to cast votes or join or block consensus. So that means we actually do not participate in the decision-making process. However, on invitation by the chair, observers may intervene in negotiations to provide a statement, for example, on a particular matter. So there is some room for observer interventions, but very limited, I would say. If observers want to make suggestions for actual changes in the text, those suggestions would only be considered if the suggestion is supported by a member state. So David also said, then it probably makes sense to talk to people before, so you will have the support of a member state. But yeah, mainly, as the name suggests, our role is to observe the negotiations. And given the structure of the IPBES plenary sessions with the different working groups that take place in parallel, it's of course important to know that you can't follow everything, and maybe you also don't want to. So depending on your own interests, think about which items of the plenary agenda you want to follow. And for that, it probably makes sense to look into the agenda again and maybe also into the documents. And for more practical guidance on where to find those and how you can prepare for the plenary, how to also keep track of the negotiations, I will hand over to Nita now. So Nita, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Naomi. And I'm sure everybody has got some idea about how negotiations occur at the plenary through Naomi and Eliška's share. So I'm coming in from the point of view of thinking not only of the people who are going to be in person over there, but like I was introduced, I had joined IPBES 8 virtually and I was lost. So I'm considering, people who are completely new and who might be joining remote and might be very new to IPBES itself. So just before I get started, and when we're talking about practicality, actually what Naomi and Eliška have been sharing is also all practical information without which you cannot engage, well with the plenary. But just to get an idea about how and where you can find the documents, and I just want to get an idea from the team that is joining right now, all of us with the audience right now, how many of you all are delegates joining the plenary, either in person? If you are joining in person, please drop that in the chat, or I can see one raised hand from Amarys, I think, or if you're joining virtually, could you do that? Can you just drop it in chat so that you get an idea of folks here? If it's neither, it's fine. I mean, we just want to get an idea about who's joining in person and who's joining virtually. Okay, one joining virtually. Paul, hi. Marius, Carla. Okay, a lot of in-person. Okay, okay. All right. Let them keep coming, and I think Ehsan and Rahul will come, and the others keeping track of that. But just some of you who are already familiar with IPBES have looked at the website and are well aware that it's amazing. It has so many resources, but it can be really tricky to find your way at times, especially for new folks. So I just opened when you sign in, I've just opened my account page, which you see on the slide right now. And I'm just going to talk about the two things which would be of most interest for delegates who are joining in. As you remember, we mentioned not only about the plenary, but also the stakeholder day. So that's why I've also signaled those events and where you can find it in the event section below the quick links. Now coming to the, Naomi, can you please go to the next slide? For those who have signed in and are aware of where to find the plenary documents, this is the site where most of the things related to IPBES 12 is housed. And before I get into even talking about, what are the documents there, I would like to remind you all that before going into nitty-gritties, one document that's already available in public is the Business and Biodiversity Primer. So before you go into more detailed documents that will be available to you through this website as a delegate, please have a look at it first to get an idea about where the plenary is going to be going. With respect to documents, so if you see this plenary website, there's a section of documents, and there are multiple things in that. There's a section called the working documents, there's information documents, there's non-paper, there's other. There are so many terminologies, and it can be a bit confusing. But what you largely stick to is the working and the information document tab. The working tab is, as the name suggests, most of the documents that are in process, which are the working documents which are in process. They are updated, they are uploaded even before the plenary and even during the plenary. So please keep a track of that. Even during the plenary, there might be multiple things that might be uploaded over there. And what do these working documents generally have? They generally have more like the condensed information about some of the negotiations and decisions which are going to be brought onto the table. And within some of these working documents, you will see the mention of information documents signaled by INF, like Eliška had in one of her slides, IPBES/plenary 12/INF/something. So that would link you to what is the information document that the working document is signaling to. So if you want to look into more detailed information, you can look into those specific information documents over there. Right. And I'm not repeating the aspect about the provisional agenda because that's again something that Eliška already put forward in a slide. But that's something definitely keep a track of, because whatever is the key agenda, this is going to be coming under the working document tab section. Whatever is coming as the key agenda that the IPBES 12 plenary team, the secretariat, etc. have been deciding to bring on the table throughout the session, that agenda would be mentioned in this provisional agenda. So please have a look in that, and that would be your main key go-to, you can say, a document besides these other documents that you'll see inside. Now, apart from that, it's important to mention that there's a lot going on, and like Eliška mentioned, there is a schedule. So you'll also see a daily schedule mentioned. So please follow that to keep track of what's going on where, what is it that you want to join and can engage with. The daily schedule will be updated over there. And in case if you miss some of these, some of the sessions and you at least want to know what's happening, there's the IISD reporting. The links are shared in another slide of mine. The IISD reportage that where the daily events are covered, and you can see what has happened during that session, during that day on that page. So before I go to the next slide, the final and a very important thing is you must be wondering, okay, we have these things, but what about the chapters? What about the assessment itself? You as delegates have the opportunity, can have the access to these documents, and you can review them in your own personal capacity. This is not the time right now when it's open for you to submit comments. It's going to be open for comments later in the year. Right now, as a delegate, when you go there, you can get access to the documents by signing up for review. So you can sign up for review and you would be having the access to these documents, which you can discuss with your team or whatever, but within your personal capacity as a delegate. It's important to restate that this is the responsibility of each of the delegates, that this is a knowledge sharing and learning experience, and all this information while you're engaging, please see to that it is kept confidential, and important decisions, important discussions are not being shared on social media or in any other form, even AI, even being used to read the documents via AI. Right. Can we go to the next slide, please, Naomi?
So please, Nita, if you have just like 1 minute to just wrap it up, because
Yeah, I'm just wrapping this up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's why I spent more on that slide just to cover that. Stakeholders Day, I mean, I've got this up because you are a stakeholder, and it's, whether you're signed up for ONET or any of these networks, you are a stakeholder here in this room, each of us, if you're interested in in the knowledge that it produces or we contribute to it. So a very good thing is, if you're interested to find the ONET facilitation team at whether online or when you're over there in person, find them, because they will help you also figure out some of the get-togethers that are happening of stakeholders. So in the daily schedule, there's a section where it's mentioned as ONET, where some of the stakeholders will be getting together. So there's an opportunity for you all to join that. So please look into that further. And I just put forward the slide on what is the schedule, like the agenda, like for the Stakeholders Day. And I think I'll stop here and Naomi, can you please show the links? The last slide, please. Please have a look at this, especially the guide to IPBES plenary meetings for new observers. This is a guide prepared by ONET. It's a little dated, but it will give you some of the practical understandings of what to expect other than what we have said. All right, yeah, thank you. I think I hope I made it in time.
All right, thank you so much,
thanks.
Naomi and Nita. That was very practical and exactly what we were looking as the first time. I mean, as for myself, like some practical advice, how to observe and how to navigate. Now I'll invite Carla to share her experience and presentation. Over to you, Carla.
Hello, and hello everybody. Yes, I'm very, very happy to do so. And I will try to bring some slides up. I recognize that it's always the adventure of going last in a session, that you recognize that a lot of what you were going to say has probably been said, which is a very good thing. So I guess I will mostly be just trying not to say it again and say things that will hopefully be more useful. Not more useful, will be more useful than repeating. And I will repeat some bits, I am sure, but I will, as I say, try to add to what has been said, because what has been said has been incredibly valuable. So here we go. I figured probably a helpful thing to do would be focus on what my experience had been as an ECR at IPBES, and I only have a handful of slides to talk over this anyway, so it was always going to be quite a brief intervention, but hopefully just something to sort of mop up any points that hadn't already been said, and maybe to give some more kind of food for thought on ideas going into engaging with the plenary or engaging with IPBES more broadly. So at the top left corner of this picture is exactly what I saw the first time I went into IPBES. So this was going into the plenary room. Below that is the group of people who I was there with, and they were all people who were involved in YESS and ESP. So my involvement in a kind of physical sense with IPBES absolutely started with YESS and engaging with the plenary, which was a wonderful experience in all of the ways that has been described, and I will try to capture in a few points over the next couple of slides. I guess it's been an interesting journey since that point. So, as I say, reflecting on what has already been said in terms of opportunities, but picking out a few sort of concrete examples. What's been quite interesting is that initial engagement and work and collaboration and interest that built from that group at the plenary has evolved into all different kinds of things. So this picture of me in the middle looking a bit scared is during the IPBES 8 Stakeholder Day. So this was all held online during the pandemic. But we ran a little workshop which is actually in the picture at the bottom, as an activity of this group on the bottom left-hand side during one of the plenary meetings to bring together early career researchers and try to explore the challenges and opportunities that we saw with engaging with science policy interface work in general, but IPBES in particular. We've published a couple of academic papers on it, but more importantly, perhaps, those have been used by lots and lots of different people wanting to engage in science policy interface work. So we're invited to speak at IPBES 8, myself and other colleagues, on this work that we've done and on the understanding that we try to develop about the challenges and opportunities. And yeah, we got to share that as part of the Stakeholder Day, which was wonderful and kind of nerve-wracking, but didn't put me off. I have been part of other IPBES plenaries, attending as an observer from ESP. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of reflections that I can add to what has already been said, I think I have one slide on IPBES 12 and one on IPBES in general. The Stakeholder Day, the vibe of Stakeholder Day, I think has been set out very well, but it's this hugely open, active, energizing day that you land into if you're attending on the very first day or the day before the plenary starts. And I've always found it a wonderful thing to engage with. You can attend all of the sessions, you can learn more about IPBES process and activities, although I think today has given a really, really good overview of that already. But there are different activities, including the marketplace. There is group work that takes place in the afternoon of the Stakeholder Day, which is constructing the statement that goes that essentially is the ONET statement, or stakeholder network statements are constructed on that day. You can participate in the group work actively that helps formulate those statements that get fed into the very beginning of the plenary process. There are lots of different IPBES actors around on that day. Many of them are speaking at Stakeholder Day, but lots of others will be arriving. So there's lots of opportunities to meet people who are involved in IPBES in all kinds of ways, including probably lots of the people that you've seen on the screen today. And I think there's lots of informal networking. So absolutely, it sounds very silly to say, but there are breaks, there's lunch, and there's time afterwards when sessions are finished. And it's wonderful to start that on Stakeholder Day to engage with the people who are around and who will be going on to attend other days of the plenary session. I think for the plenary itself, so much of this has already been said. I don't think I need to repeat this. But yeah, to be there, to have access to the process, to follow the process, to engage with different actors, I think is incredibly useful. I know that something that we've done in a sort of ad hoc way in the past, or maybe a slightly, I don't know, semi-structured, semi-ad hoc way, has been to kind of set up or join breakout meetings, particularly in kind of breaks and lunchtime, where you can catch people and have a quick conversation if they're not busy, if they're not running off to do something imminently. It's often possible to have a short conversation. And I know that we have done that as YESS delegates and ESP delegates in previous meetings. Whilst the agenda is really busy, I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, but like the IPBES plenary is relatively spacious, usually, in the sense that like there is space around the plenary rooms. There are people who will be circulating. There will be things happening, and it's always worth exploring and just sort of getting involved in them and seeing who's around, basically. There's not a lot of very formal side events, so if we're contrasting this to perhaps an experience or a description of the climate COP, for example, it's very different in scale and very different in the organization of things in parallel, but there's lots of space in which to kind of do that yourself. The last thing, so in terms of general ECR opportunities, again, lots of these have been talked about in detail. So fellows, joining expert groups, task forces, working as reviewers, joining IPBES networks and national networks. The national network in the UK, for example, where I'm based, is very, very active and exactly as has been described, if you sign up and become part of that network, then you're involved in this national community as well of dialogue around IPBES and the topics emerging there. Engaging in the broader process, so eventually becoming things like delegates, focal points, involved in secretariat or technical aspects, media and communications. There's all sorts of different flavors of ways that you can get involved in IPBES. And perhaps what I'll emphasize a little bit here, not because I think it's more important, but just because I think it's maybe something that hasn't been talked about as much. You can do work on and with IPBES. So this is one of the things that I've probably mostly done in my engagement with IPBES. There are a few examples on the right-hand side here, but this is myself and lots of other colleagues. This isn't just me. This is working with lots and lots of other people to reflect on how IPBES has worked, its effectiveness, how it's engaging with different communities. I was involved in something supporting EU negotiators through a network called Eclipse, which is also very, very good to connect with and offer your expertise to if a call has come up for expertise in the area that you are indeed an expert in. So that's another body that's worth engaging with. So we were asked to support EU negotiators on the Global Assessment Summary for Policymakers process. And the very, very bottom image here, I realize is a little bit mysterious without context, but this is what we called a mind map. So an ECR mind map that essentially the lovely group of people that you see in the bottom left-hand side photo here, we put together as part of our wonderful and slightly bewildering first engagements with IPBES and with science policy interface work, both to sort of unpack and understand what was going on for us when we were trying to get involved in this work, but also to try to think about things that we could do for ourselves, for our communities, and within our institutions to help support that work being recognized and valued and engaged with. So I'm very happy to share this. There's a few resources at the end, a number of which have already been flagged in terms of IPBES, ONET, national networks. The paper is at the bottom that has the mysterious mind map in it if you're interested to look at that. And the one other thing that I will note is IISD do wonderful reporting of IPBES plenary meetings. It's worth checking them out. They do really quite nice summaries day to day and then of the whole plenary. They do them for all different kinds of plenaries, not just IPBES. So you can have a look. I think they've got the archives here, but once the new plenary starts, they will be updating every day with the happenings of the day. I think that's a really useful way to stay involved, to remind yourself of what's happened during the days. But I think especially if you're joining online or if you're joining in a kind of mix of both, I think it's just really, really nice to get some of the sort of word on the street, as it were, from reporters who are there in the plenary meetings themselves. So I think that's all I was going to say. I hope that was a helpful addition to everything that's been said already.
Thank you so much, Carla, for such a great presentation and also sharing your experience and very informative and ways of how to engage and how to keep this engagement in long run. Thank you so much. And now I would love to our participants if they have any question from our speakers. You can raise your hands or write in the chat. Right. All right. While everyone is thinking or navigating through all the talks that we had in this session, so as David mentioned, I'm really happy that I'm a fellow who's attending this plenary for the first time, and there's a lot of things that I need to know. And okay, I'll give it to Naomi please go ahead and I'll ask later.
No, go ahead. I didn't
Yeah,
want
I
to
was just
interrupt.
thank you. I was just curious to know, like from I think maybe from all of you, just like how, like as someone who is engaging with the EPS assessments, and how to navigate and connect the relationship between the line by line negotiation and the content that we provide in the assessments. So how to make sure that the science is effectively translated there, and how to make sure that this is not you wanted to do, but in the end that you see that there's some changes. I don't know if there's someone to can answer, maybe Eliška.
Yes, of course, I can kick off. So yes, from my experience participating in some of the EBS plenaries when the assessments were considered, I understand that sometimes it can indeed be painful experience for the experts, that they see how their work is being discussed by rather policymakers, where also some of the political opinions might come into play. So sometimes there are suggestions that would really make it difficult to be translated into the language while maintaining the substance of what has been found. So yes, I've seen examples where really experts have been a bit frustrated with this process. But on one hand, I think it's really important that this process takes place so that the policymakers can take the ownership of the final outcome of the deliberations. And then when they do so, they are much more supportive of the uptake of the assessment. And on the other hand, and I think there are many members who really do highlight at every occasion that we always need to come back to the experts. So whenever this discussion is really getting a bit more difficult, so there might be a call, because the co-chairs and then some of the coordinating lead authors for specific chapters that are being discussed, they are also at the podium, so they get the floors. So they always should get the opportunity to react to those suggestions that are being made by members, and they should be able to react. Okay, this is still in line with what we have found out in our assessment or not. So they should always get the space to react to those suggestions. So it's a difficult process, but it's important, and it has worked out somehow each time. But yeah, at some point it can be quite painful to listen to those suggestions and trying to find a way how to maybe adjust the language without changing the substance of the message.
Okay, thank you. And I saw that, Naomi, you raised your hand, and now I see Carla. If you have something, Naomi, you can go first, and then.
Yeah, I don't know if Carla wants to react directly to that, so she can go first before I open something else.
Oh, sure. It was just to add something to it in case it's of interest. So the eclipse thing that I mentioned when I was speaking just now, I'm happy to put it in the chat actually. But this was one element of what that was doing in the context of the global assessment. So yeah, this is one of the first ways I got kind of pulled into the world of IPBES, was working in a it's called a sort of expert working group on this. But essentially it was a request from the European Commission to support decision makers in understanding the extent to which the core findings of the global assessment had been translated into the summary for policymakers. And I don't think I recognized that activities of that kind were happening in the background, if that makes sense, until I became involved in it. So yeah, it was very much an activity of bringing together a group. And we essentially collectively had to go through the full text of the global assessment and the summary for policymakers and do an analysis to understand whether and how those those key findings were being transposed, which was a really interesting activity. But yeah, it's a little bit old now, but it's there if it's interesting, the process or the method.
Yeah, I think my question relates quite well to that, and it's directed to Eliška, because I would be interested to hear about how you prepare for IPBES plenary sessions as a national focal point, and maybe also as a bureau member, so with your different roles in IPBES.
Thank you very much for the question. So maybe I'll start with the bureau members. So as was already mentioned, so the regional meetings take place every day. So the regions do meet and then discuss some of the issues that might need to be also discussed in working groups or the plenary. So while we don't have a very specific coordination, it's very useful to meet the members from the region and to discuss some of the items, or as also many of the members from our region, they are maybe a single person delegation, so they obviously cannot just follow all the discussions. So it's also useful to bring them up to speed and to discuss what has happened in each of the working groups. Now, what is happening at the level of the region of Eastern European states, we do have joint opening closing statement, but otherwise we do not have coordinated positions. But, and this is bringing me to the second part of the question, as for my preparation of the focal point, as the Czech Republic, we are of course a member state of the European Union. So there is really a lot of work going on within the EU, and it was already mentioned by Carla that the EU is indeed preparing very heavily for the meeting and also getting some expertise to really be able to address the agenda items. So within the EU, in fact, we do prepare together jointly. So I have to say that my preparation as a focal point, it's very much related to the work within the EU. So we have expert groups and we discuss each of the agenda items to come also with aligned position. I don't want to maybe come into details at this stage, but for each of the agenda items, there indeed are quite deep discussions within the EU on how to approach and also how to have maybe some general lines for the EU and its member states that are members of IPBES to address those. So we obviously read the documents, discuss together, provide some suggestions for the draft decisions that we will bring forward, etc. So that's also quite a lot of work going on, and we are just quite heavily involved in this at this point.
Thank you for this.
All right, thank you so much. And it was really great and very informative session. And I think we're past the time, but if our panelists or our moderators, Rahul and Louise, and if everyone else, if they don't have anything else to add, so I think it's time to wrap up the session. And thank you all again for participating this webinar. And thank you so much. And I'm very looking forward to seeing so many of you in person in Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone for joining. I'm very much looking forward to meet those of you who are going to Manchester in February. I will be there the whole week, so feel free, if we have not met personally, just to catch up, basically to exchange. And also invite you again for proposing probably another topic for a webinar. We still have open space for 2 more webinars this year. So it would be fantastic to engage with young scholars again. So I think that's all from my side. So thank you very much and see you soon. Thank you, Kian. Thank you, Eshan. Thank you, YESS. Excellent collaboration. Always happy to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.